Martin Lee, who's our chair of the group, is on his way, apparently, coming back from Salisbury Cathedral, where they've been singing evensong. He's the rector of Sherborne Abbey, and he assures me he'll be with us before the end of the session. So in the meantime, I'm Tug Wilson. I'm the one who sends out all these emails to you, which hopefully you read and don't just click delete when it arrives. You see, oh, it's that bloke again. We've got Elizabeth from London, and she's on our steering group along with Tim. Tim is the National Ecumenical Officer for the Church of England. Is that right?
I'm a National Ecumenical Officer for the Church of England.
Yeah. And then we've
I'm
got
National Ecumenical Officer for Local Ecumenism. I've no idea what that means.
and then Bishop Alistair's here. He's from Southwark. And then Andrew Wilkinson, he's there. He's up in, is it Carlisle? No, you're muted. Right. Bex is going to try and join us. She's had to decamp to Portsmouth, and there's a problem with her Wi-Fi. She's going to try and resolve that and join us, so she'll be with us shortly, hopefully. We're very pleased to welcome uh, Tom Pearson, who's going to um, really get our imagination and juices running about social media and pose a few questions, keep us on our toes. So I'll be looking forward to hearing from you, and I'll let you introduce yourself when you come on stream. In the meantime, let's just be quiet for a moment, and then I'll pray. Heavenly Father, as we gather in this virtual space, we seek your presence and guidance. Bless our Deanery greeting with productivity and purpose. Fill our hearts and minds with your wisdom and inspiration. We ask for your wisdom and grace to use our talents for the betterment of others. May we honour one another by keeping an open mind. May we voice our truth and listen with an open heart. May we discern your will to unite in a fruitful outcome. Help us to communicate effectively and listen attentively to one another. May your Spirit lead our discussions and decisions. Grant us unity and understanding as we work towards our goals to further your kingdom. In Jesus' name, amen. Tom, over to you. We're in your hands, and we'll see how we get on.
Thank you ever so much. What a delight it is to be with you all this evening. My name is Tom Pearson, and I have been a freelancer now, working with many charities and organisations since about 2006. I work with folks like Thy Kingdom Come, the Church of England. I work for the Methodists in Great Britain. I work for the Lambeth Conference. I work for all sorts of folks, right down to little charities like the Guild of Health and St. Raphael. And I provide all sorts of services, consultancy, production, events, those sorts of things. But it's a real delight to be able to chat to you this evening about social media and what that perhaps means for us. And just to give you a bit of an outline, because I think when I'm at these sorts of events, I like to know what's going to happen. So I'm going to chat to you probably until about 8:05. And then I'm going to invite Bex and Tim and Bishop Alistair to join me just for a bit of a sort of open discussion, but also to hear their experiences, pitfalls and wins that they have encountered. We'll have a bit of a screen break at about 8:15. So there's one for your notepad and pen 8:15. We'll have a bit of a screen break. Then we'll come back and we're going to break out groups until about 20 to 9. At which point, when we come back into this space, it will be a really good time that anything that you've discussed in your groups that you would like to kind of bring to the wider group, and perhaps ask me, bounce around some ideas amongst ourselves and with the panel. And we'll be finishing about 9 o'clock, as you always do, in prayer. The chat is open, and I'm keeping an eye on that. I've got a shape of things that I want to talk about this evening. And obviously, if things come up in the chat that we need to address, then we will, or we'll maybe hold on to them as something for the panel or even for the discussion groups. If there's one thing that you take away from this evening, I would like it to be that as people of faith, we are called to be salt and light. Matthew 5:13-16. And I would love that to be the voice in your head, salt and light, whenever you are on social media. Because to show restraint, to show love, to show pastoral care is so exceptionally difficult in an environment which is designed to stoke engagement. Perhaps some of us might even say that there are platforms there which are designed to stoke toxicity. Because ultimately, all of those platforms are advertising machines. And as the old adage goes, good news doesn't sell papers. Niceties doesn't really get ad clicks. Rage baiting, where you are baited into responding in anger and feeling that emotion of anger, gets engagement and ultimately power and money. It's sort of as old as media has been, as old as advertising has been, is what social media is creating for us. It's those environments that get us engaged, get us frustrated, whether it be righteous anger or just annoyance. And there's a lot of things wrong in this world that people can post about and stir up that frustration and that anger and that annoyance and those feelings of inferiority or superiority. But to churn that out constantly, a machine has to come into play. And those machines generate content that generate emotions for those who consume the content. And then we have algorithms, often talked about in either hushed tones or excitable tones in the media when we talk about the algorithms, the echo chambers of social media. And the problem is, it's true. Let me paint you a picture. The word unicorn appears 9 times in the Bible. Now, some of you will know immediately to what I'm referring. You'll even know which version that appears in. Some of you won't, and that's okay. And some of you will be annoyed at that very concept. Some of you will have opinions on the translation. Some of you will want to impart that knowledge to me and tell me. Some of you will want to share that knowledge with other people, and some of you won't want to go into battle about it. It's a very innocuous term. I've picked something that, we could have a conversation about, and probably no one's going to feel any the worse afterwards. Certainly not attacked. They're probably going to continue to feel safe. And it's true. The word unicorn really is in the King James version 9 times. I can prove it to you. I can find a link on Bible Gateway, and I can share it in the chat, and then you can click on it and you can see it for yourself. So I've provided you with my source, and you'll see that it's true. Which is great. However, what if that source wasn't quite as reliable as Bible Gateway? And is Bible Gateway a reliable source? Who pays for it? Do advertisers have influence over the content? What if I was to share this on social media, but as a meme? What if I was to share it and add, without any context, a take, an opinion? Perhaps I say that the unicorns roamed the lands and that it's biblical. And I sort of left it at that. It's a very innocuous mic drop, isn't it? But, there it is. As people started to engage in it, a few people would say, oh, that's interesting. And a few people would become annoyed by the fact that I was perhaps twisting things. But quite quickly, other people would twist the narrative, the story, the headline. We're probably quite good at dealing with newspaper headlines. Traditional media, particularly in the UK with our newspaper industry, for instance. If I was to name some of our UK newspapers, you would know which way they were leaning. If I said the Mirror or the Telegraph, you would know immediately which way they were leaning. And you would probably know the slant that they give their news, therefore, that a perfectly factual line could be twisted into a 100-word story. We could maybe find some so-called experts. We could find some folks on the street to comment on it. And suddenly we've got ourselves a very different story from that meme that I posted that would just say that unicorns used to roam the land and that it is biblical. We're really good at understanding that when we look at newspapers, but when we look at social media, lines get more and more blurred, because so often we take with us the weight of traditional media, and when we go online into a free-for-all arena, we apply many sources with the same ethics, broadcasting code, Ofcom regulations, etc. So let's just try something. Let's try and get everybody just slightly out of their comfort zone. I'm going to tell you a headline without any emotion in it, and I'd love you to put into the chat the social media post that you might put. Now, if you would say that you're more one way or the other leaning, try going the other way, just to put it in. Nothing, offensive, nothing that's going to hurt anybody. It's going to be a fairly innocuous thing that I'm gonna give you. But yeah, so publishers Holding and Cooper released the Things to Do Children's Bible. One page. So to give you context, the Holding and Cooper, the Things to Do Children's Bible has the text of the Bible, and then in the margin has sort of things that you can do, practical things and an exercise that you can do that relate to the stories or what was, what lesson was trying to be told. So there's one page which encourages children to steal from their parents to put into the collection at church. So to steal from parents' purses, wallets, and put it in the collection at church. So what I want is a social media post and take a few moments to write that. Let's see if we can get each other just slightly riled up. Holding and Cooper have released the Things to Do Children's Bible, and one of the exercises is that you can steal from your parents, steal money from your parents, and pop it into the collection at church. Are we the publisher or the journalist? You are just a member of the public. You've heard this story told, you've read it, and you're posting on social media. So you're just popping something on social media. One of those rage-based popes. New Bible encourages children to steal from their parents. Excellent. Have you seen the new children's Bible that tells children to steal from their parents? Publisher encourages children to thieve in the name of religion. I like that. Excellent. New woke socialist Bible publisher brainwashes children to redistribute wealth. Oh, fantastic. Excellent. Excellent. Bible as you've never seen it. Stealing no longer a sin. Excellent. Wonderful. Wonderful. Can we get a really good, a really positive spin on this? I mean, we're Holding and Cooper, not so good at holding. Apprentice scheme for thieves. Fantastic. Let's find a really positive slant on this. Something really good. Let's get out of our comfort zones and promote why this might be brilliant. Nick to give, why not? It's true. Holding and Cooper's recommended activities include stealing. Unbelievable. Wonderful. Cannot believe that a publisher of a Bible could encourage children to steal. I like that particularly. Very little context. Very little context. That's very social media worthy. That's excellent. Children being encouraged to repurpose parents' finances to support their local church. Yes, there we go. Oh, so good. New Bible tells children to give more to church. Love it. Parents who keep back their tithe now have no escape. Refreshing hermeneutic scene in Bible for Kids. Give more than you get. Wonderful. Do keep them coming in as we talk about them. So, do you know what? As I read those out, and as you've been looking at them, I can sort of imagine all of them being posted on social media. They've got very little context. There's very little of the deeper story. Really easy for people to get angry one way or the other. Whatever you post, they can agree with you emphatically. They can disagree with you. They can share your post. The thing is, and this is, you hopefully you'll be aware of this. If not, you are now. Holding and Cooper doesn't exist. The Things to Do Children's Bible is fake. I made it up in the drive over here. And there certainly wasn't anything in the margin telling anybody to steal. But in this exercise, I told you about it, and in this exercise, I asked you to post it on social media, and or if it, if I just mentioned it, you might have taken to social media, or one might have taken to social media and posted it. So not only is there no context, but we've just created 20, 30 posts in a few moments. This thing starts going a bit viral. Every side of the argument is being had. People are losing friends over this. They're arguing. Churches are creating amnesties for children to tell if they have handed in money. We've suddenly hyped ourselves up into a frenzy, and yet none of it was true. Poor Bishop Alistair's just posted on Twitter by mistake. These things can happen, Bishop Alistair. You know, it takes an enormous amount of effort to fact check things, to the point that that term of "I've done my own research," you need to do your own research, don't be a sheep, come on sheeple, wake up, becomes a rally cry to get deeper and deeper into the murky, murky world. What I would really encourage is restraint, awareness of the echo chamber. My wife and I laughed that we are basically have the same algorithm now. That's really concerning. We are two quite different people in many ways. We have learnt to work together. We have different interests. Some are shared, and yet the content we both get is often very similar, to the point that we now joke that I will start to say something I've read online and she will finish it. But the algorithm understands that. The algorithm says, I want to reassure you that whatever you're thinking and feeling is rewarded. But every now and again, I will drop a little rage bait in front of you to really get you riled up, to get the them and us surging through your veins. And it's at those points that the dopamine disappears and the adrenaline kicks in and the keyboard warrior comes out in all of us. And that we think that we are being justified, righteously angry, that we're jumping in and trampling over somebody for all the right reasons. Perhaps sometimes, if we're honest with ourselves, perhaps if we are honest with ourselves, sometimes not for the right reasons. Probably, we wouldn't do that if the person was stood in front of us. Probably. Not every person is going to be the right person to be the pastoral presence at your church. Not every person is going to be the right person to be in the prayer team, or the grief counsellor, or the debt counsellor. So perhaps not every person is best suited to social media. As churches, when we choose to have a social presence, we have an opportunity. We can make it into a digital notice board. There's nothing particularly wrong with that. It's nothing particularly new. We can post all of our events. We're not going to get a huge amount of engagement. But having just said all I have about engagement, maybe that's not a bad thing. We can just post about events and services and the new roof and the gardening. But we could choose to have folks who want to engage with others and to be the salt and light. We could choose to have digital missionaries, to have people to go into those dark places, the places where the anger and the hurt is happening, the political arguments, the comments underneath those particular rage baiting websites, newspapers, and bring hope and peace. We could admit to ourselves that in a social media comment section, no one's mind is going to be changed by anything that we have to say. So is simply confronting, arguing, the very best course of action? The truth is, even with demonstrably faked information, it is really difficult to tell people that it's not true. So what can we do that makes us different? There's a website called ground.news. It's very interesting for getting a perspective on things. I've picked again something that is perhaps not too contentious within this group around US student visas, and the idea that they might change the way of processing those and where that sits in social media. So I've popped the link in the chat there. And what's really interesting about this website is it allows you to click on left, center, right, and bias comparison for all of the news stories. And in doing so, it gives us an insight into how some of the most contentious issues, the most emotive issues, are being handled from those different perspectives. And once we know what those different perspectives are, we can venture into the comment section on Facebook or X, formerly known as Twitter, into Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, and be different. Show love and compassion, pastoral care to people without ever being patronizing, by pausing before we hit that send or that post button. So as churches, we have the opportunity to have our digital notice board, and we have our opportunity to have our digital missionaries. But we also have the opportunity to have digital pastoral care, where when somebody who is hurting asks a question, makes a statement, that we can be there to field that. And that is not a job for everyone, just as it wouldn't be in your church building. If somebody walks in clearly distressed, clearly with additional needs, addictions, frustrations, confusion, there will be people who are best equipped to offer them refuge, direction, a listening ear. And so perhaps one of the things we can do is look how we can provide a pastoral refuge on social media, taking a pause and rising above the clamour of the arguments, the noise, the chaos, as if you are on a balcony looking down in a shopping centre at Saturday morning on bank holiday weekend in May and seeing that rushing around and being there ready to receive those, seeking out those who need the comfort, not jumping straight in to add to the noise, to add to the anger, to fuel the flames. In internet culture, it's called feeding the trolls. And sometimes our righteous anger, our wishing to stand up for the othered, the downtrodden, can just add to the hate and the anger and the clamour. Sometimes it's easier to just hit share on a meme because it matches our politics or our beliefs. And in doing so, it perpetuates a myth or it hurts somebody. Sometimes when we see someone's post, we jump into the comment section. The whataboutisms, where you say, but what about? Or you jump into the comment section to read somebody the riot act, or to jump in to agree with them wholeheartedly in a them and us battle. Instead, why not look around? Who is being attacked in that moment? Who is feeling hurt or downtrodden? Can we take an enormous breath and then let it out and then go to their side? We don't need to do it in front of the crowd like Jesus. We can take them away from the clamour, away from the shouting voices and the noise, the righteous anger, the hatred, and speak to people one-on-one. Obviously, in everything I've said, it's really important to comply and to follow and to honour the social media policies and the safeguarding guidelines. They are there not to drag us down or to frustrate us, but to protect us and those around us so that we can continue to be the salt and the light. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. Now over to thank you. Yeah, well done. Over to Tim, Alistair, and Bex. Having listened to what Tom's got to say, any horror stories or positive stories or comments that you'd like to make, apart from posting it on Twitter by mistake?
I love that.
I know Bex can follow up with some Church of England media involvement in a minute or two, but let me just give an example from the 2009 Women Bishops debate taking place at General Synod. I've been on Synod a wee while, and when I started on Synod in about 2005, I wanted to try and find a way of sort of helping others realize what Synod was up to try and get a sort of a more open, from the coalface sort of perspective. And about the only way of doing that at that stage was using something called a blog back in those prehistoric times. And I ran something called the General Synod blog. I opened it up to anybody who was a Synod member who wanted to post as well. C of E comms were very dubious about me doing this and did their utmost to make sure that I did not have access to ways of blogging at all. I had to sort of write and through the debates and then beetle downstairs somewhere and find where I could actually plug in, get online, post it up later that evening or something like that. They were very, very reluctant to have anything because they wanted control over what it was that somebody was saying. Who knew whether I was going to be fair or balanced in whatever I was going to write? They're absolutely right to think that, of course. But then when it came to the 2009 debate, Justin Brett and I were the two main contributors at one point, and we were blogging live the women bishops debate. And actually, one of the things that people were commenting on was that actually they were hearing that there was no live stream from Synod at that stage. And so our moment by moment updating of the blog as we did it was the quickest way that people round and about were getting a grasp of this. We then moved on soon after that. Oh, and if you want it, there's I'll put there a link to the very, very old link just in the in the chat, just for anybody who's interested. And there's plenty more. If you click on the top of the link there, it'll take you to all the other General Synod blogs from that sort of era. But then once Twitter started to take on, it took on a different thing. I had exactly the same issues with that. I got the name Gen Syn for Twitter. I offered it to the comms team. They said, no, thank you. About a year later, I offered it to them again. They still said, no, thank you. And then when it came to one of the big women bishops debates again, they said, you better give that straight to us right now. And I said, I tried twice and you said no. So there we go. There is a separate one there. Enough from me. Bex, you've had some experience of trying to do comms within the Church of England too.
I have. So I've done running social media accounts both inside the Church of England. So I've run social media at Lambeth Palace for a bit, run the campaign for a group called Warm Welcome, but also done running social media in government, which was fascinating and really different doing that for a government department. I'm always really excited by some of the theology behind it as someone who originally read theology a very long time ago. So the Sultan Light, as Tom mentioned, and the bit about letting your conversations always be full of grace. But also for me, I think, and this might sound a bit bonkers given how controversial it's got now, but there's something of the Great Commission that's been given to us in the Gospels about being called to go where people are. And I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with socials, but it is where people are. You know, the amount of time I've got three young kids that they spend online on their devices is incredible, and despite my best efforts, seems to be going up all the time. I mean, there are huge pitfalls. I'm a huge fan of Anglican Twitter, and it's not become a terribly nice place to hang out some of the time of late. And a lot of dioceses and a lot of friends of mine have left. I haven't, in the hope of being Sultan Light. But I think the big thing for me about social media is the social bit of the social media, the fact that it's two-way, the listening, the engaging. Whichever organisation I've done social media for, whether it's been a parish church or a consultancy or Lambeth Palace, the bit that really gets my goat is when an account just puts out stuff. You know, that relentless feel that information's being bombarded at you and there's no engagement. You put a comment or you like or you do a retweet and it's like falls in a forest and no one's listening. Does it matter? No one cares. So I really love and get inspired and excited by seeing accounts, churches, parishes who can do that two-way listening online, which it does take more work. But it's really great. And I think we're in a really unique position as the church in that we already have leaders who are creating and sharing content every single week because someone has to stand up and deliver a sermon at church. So how we capture some of that, whether it's someone holding an iPhone at the back and getting a little bit of video and putting a 60-second clip online, or turning a really great line from a sermon into a quote and sticking it on Canva and turning it into content. We've kind of got a head start over lots of the rest of the world when it comes to social media because we already have that content. Yeah, that was a lot, so I'll stop.
Tim.
Yeah, my turn. I mean, I really loved Tom's talk, and that kind of vision of pastoral mission is just amazing. But most of the conversation so far has been about national, big organization stuff and those kind of viral tweets that we sometimes come across. But as Beck says, a lot of social media work. We're here, National Deaneries Network, and a lot of social media is remarkably local because it's within the networks of people. And I'm very conscious of work I've done with groups of churches, individual congregations who are want to use. I mean, this is an NDN session, so most people will be here wondering how useful social media is for their church, their parish, their deanery. And in preparation for this meeting, I was looking back at the communication strategy for Churches Together in Milton Keynes, which I helped them produce a couple of years ago. And it was really helpful for them to sit down and do that piece of work and ask the questions, why are we wanting to communicate using social media? What are our goals? What are we trying to achieve? And they were very keen to increase the connection, the relationship between member congregations, and focus on the 5 marks of mission. They had a really clear vision of what they wanted to do. Who's the target audience? Who are you trying to reach? And when you've got those things clearly in your mind, you can then start thinking about the channels, the particular types of social media you choose to use, who's going to post, how often you're going to post, what you're going to say. And actually, I found that kind of approach to be really, really helpful. And thinking again of this particular group of churches, they had an administrator, and so she really took to it and still does an amazing job, mainly using Facebook. Um, and often just retweeting things that individual churches and groups in the area are doing. But as she was doing that, building networks. But one of the issues they had, which did generate a certain amount of the kind of Twitter storm type thing, was when a particular event was hosted by the Church of Jesus Christ and the Latter-day Saints, which generated a very nice storm. And of course, the question, well, they can't be members actually because they're not, So it was anyway. I mean, I just leave that there, but just kind of putting that focus back on the local and the fact that actually it is useful, but still having to be aware of those risks. But at the end of the day, being intentional, knowing what you're trying to achieve, how you're going to achieve it, who's going to do it, all those kind of questions that Tom raised. But I just love Tom's vision for being pastoral on social media. I fear I don't have the skills.
I love that. And Bishop Alistair, you talked about insight, and I think sometimes we have insight, we have opportunities that other people might not have, whether that is General Synod, Diocesan Synod, Deanery meetings, whether it is conversations that I'm not talking confidential, obviously, but conversations or meetings that you're involved with that actually a wide audience deserves to understand and know about. And being able to give that insight allows people to understand what's happening. And sometimes, as you say, trying to be as factual as possible. It is basically impossible to be impartial. We are humans. We have partiality built into us. We have opinions, but trying to just present things and lay things out, allowing people to ask questions and being open to questions. And as Beck says, that's where this two-way conversation comes in, that there are so many broadcast only channels where organizations just pump content out. And I'm talking about very tiny churches up to massive charities and organizations. They just put things on, and that's fine. But there is a missed opportunity to engage with people. And we have content ready to go, as Beck says. And Tim's idea of or concept of plan and strategy, I could not agree more. I mean, oh my goodness, knowing what you're going to go into, at least having a plan so then you know why you've diverted from it. But having a plan, who's going to do what? And one thing I'd add to that would be supervision and pastoral support for those who do that work. So supervision, that you've got someone in the church, accountability, but really just to be able to talk things through with, I said this, or I made this comment, or I thought this and I felt this, but then also about the pastoral support, because it is a really toxic place to be sometimes online. And just having someone to go to and go, oh, I thought I was saying a nice thing, or oh, these people are really hurting, or whatever it might be, is so important. Protecting ourselves and our well-being in those spaces. Wonderful, wonderful. So very practically, I think that things like social media policies for your church and social media plans are really, really good, um, and worth investing time and resource into. I've popped a couple of links in the chat there to the Church of England's resources, the Digital Lab resources. Take a look at those and do explore more deeply how those might fit well into your context. And there's lots and lots of other resources from the church nationally, and obviously from within your own network as well. However, for our breakout group time together, I would really love us to explore the idea of digital pastoral support and digital missionaries. Digital pastoral support being there, being available to answer theological questions, signposting to help and support, whether it be around addiction or debt or baptism routes. It can be about being that person. So I'd love to really unpack some of what that could look like. The other is around digital missionaries. How do we send? How do we be where people are, meeting them where they are at, as Bex unpacked for us? So I would love for us as in groups to really think about digital pastoral support. What does it look like? What does pastoral support look like? What can it look like? What could it look like? What should it look like? And also the idea of digital missionaries. What does it look like to go, to be sent, to be in those spaces? What do we do differently? How are we the salt and the light? So we have some breakout rooms ready, I believe, Tug.
Yeah.
And I think we are back. Are we thinking we'll come back at about 22, aren't we? Something like that?
Yeah, about 22. Yeah.
About 22. Fantastic. And I think there's a 60-second countdown there. Wonderful. Do enjoy your time in the groups.
Tom, we're going to have an opportunity now for folk to ask some questions or to put some points. The best thing to do is if you put them in the chat, and then I'm hoping Martin's all going to help out and keep an eye on those, and then we'll marshal those and then put them to the panel and to Tom, etc. So a quick opportunity to put some stuff in the chat. Any questions, comments, horror stories, always welcome. And this idea about encouraging children to repurpose the parents' finances, I think, is an interesting one.
I heard about that. I'm sure it was, yeah. I was in a Zoom meeting and someone told me about it. Yeah. I must get that book and complain about it. It's so easily done, isn't it?
Yeah.
Official Church of England policy now.
So James has put here, what about Pope says nice things, but you can't source that quote? Interesting. Is that something you've tried? Where's
You see it lots. You see, I mean, it's C.S. Lewis, and a marvelous quote from C.S. Lewis, and he's written a lot of stuff. Maybe he did say that. And the Pope, I mean, there's lots of popes. Maybe a Pope has said that. But they never come with footnotes. These things, and even frankly, even mere Christianity. Well, there's quite a lot in there. So, and the quote is always lovely. The quote, the Pope never says we should take our pitchforks and go and find sinners and burn them. So it's never that sort of a quote. It's always let's love and hug everyone. Pope says, And then this gets shared lots because, well, I mean, you can't disagree with that, can you? But then there's a part of you that goes, what does it mean for me to be sharing a quote that I don't know.
I think it's the answer is it is either incredibly innocent or incredibly dangerous, and it's the sort of you know when you have a tank of water and an empty tank and you have a pipe and you run it through and you do that little siphoning little suck and then just one drip and then more and then more and then suddenly you've filled that other chamber and you think, gosh, that happened ever so quickly. And all I did is just take one little suck and I just took one little drop and suddenly I've done this. And yeah, so we might think, well, it's a nice quote, isn't it? You know, I can share it and it is probably fine. But is it something that then takes on a life of its own? I mean, there are plenty of, misattributed quotes. Do all the good you can by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, at all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as ever you can. And I'm sure we all know that to be John Wesley, except it probably absolutely isn't. And yet, I've got a bag with that written on that someone gave me very kindly, attributing it to John Wesley. Okay, well, it's still a great quote, whether he said it or he didn't. But I think it's that attitude of, well, it's fine, I'll share it anyway. And then it becomes, well, yes, I did share a fake BBC News story and someone called me out on it below. And so I commented and said, oh, well, I think it anyway. And then it spirals. And that's not to say that anyone here would do that, but it is just that slippery slope. In terms of actually attributing quotes, one of the great things about our denomination leaders, whether they be bishops or whether they be popes or whether they be archbishops, is the majority of public speeches and sermons they give are actually recorded. And in fact, there are heaps of records. Bex may well know very well of the Lambeth Palace Library, etc., and huge amounts of records that are kept from that side of things. So actually, we can do our due diligence and we can dig through the records and we can find the quote, and then we have to ask ourselves, was it worth it? But I think each time it comes back to the salt and light. Am I adding something positive to this? Martin's saying that at the Abbey, their curate is doing incredible work to manage for them all of their record keeping around sermons and speeches, etc. Everything that the Pope says is recorded on hundreds of microphones, and palantypists are logging it.
It's one of the things actually, just to go up that, to pick up that we've actually really tried to think about how we make sure our website is up together, how it's coming on, and we've looked at it, changing it around and getting on top of social media and posting it, and however Becca does it, because she's actually fantastic at it, and that makes me incredibly lazy because I can say I'm an old man who's not very good at these things, and she just picks it up and does it. But I think you do need someone who's that's an agency, and say, personally, I really appreciate her doing it because it comes so naturally to her. It's a world in which she's lived in, and I'm quite not as good as that. But so it is something which, if you can possibly find somebody in a church to do that for you, it's really, really good. And people who've got them who use social media easily would be only too pleased to do it for you.
Can I ask Martin, who actually decides what is posted? Is there a process, or is it just left down to your curate and she does whatever she feels?
No, we normally have a conversation about it. So if she's before she posts something, she might say, "Shall I post something about X, Y, and Z?" So we go to that, or I would say to her, oh, can you put something on about the tea rooms or whatever that's going on? Can you put something on? So there is a mechanism that she doesn't just put things on, that we talk about it beforehand before it goes on.
Janet's put there, it's important that the church is representative and positively on represented positively on social media. She likes the idea of digital disciples. Could you talk a little bit more about that, Tom? How do you see that working?
Yeah, and I think there, as Janet goes on to say, that it's so easy for things to get misunderstood, or deliberately seem to stir up a negative reaction. I think that word deliberately is a really important one, because sometimes, and you can look at this on some of the biggest social media channels, just get a flavor for this, is that they will post a good news story. Let's take something that's not in our domain. So Liverpool Football Club, every now and again will post on their social media short videos of making a young fan's dreams come true. Often a child who has been particularly brave or done something particularly courageous, is perhaps has additional needs or has a shorter life expectancy, etc. And that is, wonderfully presented. It's very, very positive. And you might say, well, can't say anything negative about that. Look in the comments, and you do need to take a deep breath before doing this, but look in the comments. And first of all, you're going to see stuff that is going to say unpleasant things about that child, about the players that child meets. You're going to see unpleasant things about the football club. You're going to then see really random things like, I keep trying to call customer services about my tickets for Saturday and no one's picking up. And you go, why is that a comment under this? but something that, if you would say, if you were just sat around a table and someone told you that story of that child meeting those players and the look on that child's face, you would say, this is wonderful, this is brilliant, oh, wonderful. If someone on that table then piped up and just said real negative stuff, first of all, you might be horrified, but equally, with our less emotional hat on, we might think, I wonder what's hurt that person. I wonder what is affecting them to have that reaction in this moment. So sometimes what we do is we post something that we think can only be received positively. And if negativity comes our way, imagine that person being sat in a small group in church. How might you address that person? What might you do? And also, is in front of the group the right place to address it, i.e., the public comments? Because if you wouldn't necessarily need to speak to that person in that space, or that wouldn't be the best approach, then perhaps a public conversation isn't the best. Mm-hmm. Somebody, if I may, John, has talked about the algorithmic. Oh,
we understand
the echo chamber, the algorithmic echo chamber. There we go. I had to have a run up at that word. The algorithmic echo chamber. And how do we hear wider voices while not flooding our feed with content we don't want? That second part, again, I think is so important, because if you go, let's say, let's say in general, you are more centre or left of centre in politics. If you go roaming onto Fox News and GB News and Newsmax and various other profiles on your chosen social media, more than even just once or twice, the algorithm is going to start to give you more of that. And interestingly, your echo chamber is going to start to shift, which by the way, and I'm not talking necessarily about those news outlets, but that's the way that things like radicalization happens. It's that gradual shift towards a new perspective. And so being shifted one way or another may be positive, may be negative, depending on where you're going and what the subject matter is. But as your echo chamber changes, so you get to see what is troubling the other side, or troubling people with a different focus to yours, which is incredibly healthy to do, because actually sometimes if you can just, again, wade through the noise and the headline and the rage bait and the clickbait, you may find that perhaps all is not roses on your side of the fence. But the danger of that is that your safe space becomes flooded. So there's a few things you can do. Ground News is really good for that. That's the website I posted earlier. So ground.news allows you to safely have a look at how different news outlets are reporting on the same stories. And that can be really helpful. And it also helps you to understand someone's perspective. So if someone is really raging about the story of the day, they're really wound up and angry, and your perspective goes, I don't see it like that at all. I can't see how you're not seeing it from my perspective. They believe the same. And by popping over to something like Ground News, you can go and look at that story from a hard swing in the opposite direction to where you're getting your news. And you start to read these things and you go, oh, I see why they're so wound up, because the way that they are being influenced is in this way. So it is against the terms of service of most social media platforms to have multiple personal profiles. There are ways of creating page profiles, for instance. There are ways of creating profiles for organizations, etc. But keeping yourself protected and safe within those environments is really important.
Alistair's got a comment there about where is it? I've lost it now.
Okay. There's one there from Alistair. Alistair, if I could ask you to address, Tom, if you may. Are there social media outlets we should steer away from? Because that's a very helpful thing to know, especially if you're not up together with how it's all going on.
Yes, indeed. Goodness me.
Perhaps it's easier to tell us which ones we can use. Might be the smaller number.
So my reason for pausing is because you'll have noticed that throughout this evening, I've tried to be incredibly diplomatic and without swaying any political leanings, any opinions, any theological point of view, etc., to really try and create a space here where we feel that we can talk about the facts. I think one of the most important things to do is your research on the platform and who is there, and to listen to those around you that you respect and that have a track record which deserves that respect, and see where they are operating. Because on one side of it's difficult because it's not exactly a spectrum, but we have things like Truth Social, which is a platform which Donald Trump invested in and is favored certainly by the conservative right. And then we have probably things like Blue Sky, which is going to, or even Threads potentially, which is going to be probably more left. That's not to say one or other side is right. It is that what you want to then know is, if that's the echo chamber, who is the loudest noise in that echo chamber? Who is getting the most amount of following and traction? Facebook in general tends to be fairly middle age, middle England, middle of the road, middle most things. It's a little bit cliche, but that perhaps is there. And Instagram in general tends to probably be a fairly milder place to be. But again, those of us with daughters will be fearing the makeup and beauty influence that something like Instagram might have on our daughters and their perception of body and worth and those sorts of things. So wherever you end up finding your tribe, making sure that you remain safe within that environment and aware of the sources that are being thrown at you is probably the most important part of it. And if it starts to feel toxic for you, then either force change your algorithm by searching deliberately for content that you want and clicking on it and consuming it, and your algorithm will force change over time, or get out. You don't have to be on social media. Church planting isn't for everybody. Fundraising isn't for everybody. The ministry of the laying out of chairs before a service is not for everybody. So find the place that works best for you and where you can minister most effectively.
Lovely.
Okay,
Tom, thank you
you
very much. Yeah, I'm looking at the time.
Yes, Tommy, Tug, we're coming up to it. Is there anything else that anybody else would like to say just before we bring ourselves to a close? I'm mindful that it's coming up to 9 o'clock. That's good. Tom, I'm sorry I've missed the first 10 minutes of this evening, but it's been fascinating listening this evening. You've given us a really thought-provoking evening tonight. Thank you very much indeed. And for some of us, it's been good to be challenged about how important social media can be and how it can be used to its best ability and in our church work. So thank you very much for that. And I think Bishop Alistair and Bex and Tim have been working with you to produce this evening. So thank you for that very much. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us this evening for our evening. And I hope you've had a really good evening, as I'm sure you have. So before we close now, let's just be still for a moment for a quiet prayer. There's a lovely Celtic blessing which says, "May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the warm rays of sun fall upon your home, and may the land of a friend always be near." Amen. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for being with us this evening, and we look forward to seeing you again. Tug will be definitely in touch with you about the next briefing and letting us know when that's coming up. And members of the group, if you'd just like to stay for a few moments, that would be really, really helpful. But everyone else, can we say good night and thanks very much indeed for coming. Good night, everyone.
You.
Thank you. Bye-bye.